I am a personal historian and freelance writer, and my joy is to help people take the stories that they're carrying around in their head, unsafely stored, and get them written down, told, written down, and into books. This is a sample. This is one that I did for my dad, and it has stories that he told, and it's in first person, so it's his voice, it's not my voice, but I was the one that helped facilitate it. And it's stories from his growing up, it's stories from traveling with his family, it's stories of hardship, and it's stories of surviving and thriving. And it was really a joy for me to help him do that. We have family letters that I transcribed, letters from my grandfather, who I never met, that when I read his letters for the first time, I was hearing his voice for the first time. And it's just been such a gift. Everyone in my family has copies of these. These are things that you can do too. Everyone has a unique story. But part of what we're talking about in the big picture, we all need to be looking at what we're carrying around all the time. And part of it is all that paper in our house. So I wanted first to talk about paper stuff. Now, have any of you ever heard that you're supposed to keep your taxes and tax returns for 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay. I had heard that too. And so I went to the IRS website, and I had a hard time finding what the time limits were. And so what I found was, it's included in here almost pretty much verbatim from the IRS handout. If you have not filed your tax return, hold on to everything. If you have filed a fraudulent tax return, hold on to everything. But if you have followed the law and done what you're supposed to, depending on whether you run a business or whether you're just a regular old taxpayer, it's about between 3 and 4 years. And the guidelines are here. So you really, the rest of all those files that you've been holding on to, all those bank statements you've been holding on to for years and years and years, you can throw them away. You don't need to hold on to them. It's better to shred them because they may have stuff like your social security number on them. But you don't have to keep making room for them in the limited space that we all have. So that's the really good news. The other thing is, where do you keep special important things? Do any of you have your will in your safe deposit box? Yes. The original will? Yeah. You are probably, that's the wrong place to keep it. You do not want the original in the safe deposit box. You want at least a copy where something that's official outside in a safe place. The reason why is unless you have someone else's name also on your safe deposit box, when you need to find, when the people in your family need to find that will, nobody can legally access it. The bank won't let them without going to the court. Probate, we all know probate costs money, takes time, it's a huge inconvenience. Do not keep the original of your will in your safe deposit box unless you've got somebody else that is also on it. It's much better to keep it in a waterproof, fireproof type container. One of the reasons I bring this up, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine that's a personal historian, you all went through Hurricane Sandy. People down in New Jersey, New York, you know what happened in Hurricane Sandy. My friend Mary lives down there, and after Hurricane Sandy, she went into parts of her community that had basically been washed away, and everything was gone. And she said, when I asked for what do I tell people, and she said, tell them to put them in watertight storage containers up off the floor, not against an outside wall. Because she helped with finding these waterlogged documents, scanning them, resurrecting precious family photos that had been nearly destroyed with salt water. And it just, when you've had an experience like that, you say, oh, it will never happen in Medfield. Well, they never thought it would happen where they were either. You just don't know. And so part of when you go through and say, what do I really need to hold on to, is deciding what's crucial, what's nice to have, and what's I just don't need it anymore. And those crucial things, those insurance policies, those documents that, deeds to your house, deeds to your car, the title to your car, things like that, you need to keep in plastic waterproof places that you know where they are and that they're labeled so that you can find them. And that's a gift to yourself. It's also a gift to your family, if anything happens. So there's more details in here about specifically, I spoke with a lawyer and he gave me some things that he tells all of his people about having a folder that's clearly marked, that gives you kind of a treasure map for where are all these things in your house, because you know they're not all going to be in one place. But give people it takes some work. But when you're thinking about it, and a workshop like this is a good place to think about it and say, okay, well, what steps do you need to take? You first have to prioritize it. So, all right, so we've talked about family documents. Well, another thing that this same friend Mary told me was remind people to, if you've got special things like family letters, family Bibles, precious pieces of furniture that have a story, tell people about them and make sure people know that story. For the Bibles, tell people what you want them to do. Do you care? Is there a family tree in there that you should document now and get that, all that information, all those birth dates, all those wedding and death dates now? Get those down. There's Ancestry.com, most people know of, but there's also familytree.org. And that it's a free website that you can enter in documents. So those are things, tell people about these important things. And I will share you a story from that. I have a friend who's in Franklin. Her uncle was a war hero. He died in World War II rescuing his shipmates. Some of you who are older remember the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and that happened in World War II. Her uncle was in that battle, and his ship was sunk. He survived the sinking, but then after that, while they were in the water for 50 hours, he had shipmates that were off in the wreckage. He swam 8 times to rescue other shipmates and bring them back to the life raft. But in the midst of rescuing them, at one point, the sharks took him. So he gave his life for his shipmates. She did not know this story. Just a couple years ago, somebody called her and said, I want to write that story of Leyte Gulf, and I've heard about what your uncle did. Do you have anything? And she said, well, I don't know. I never knew him. He died before I was born. But she said, I know that my father said, don't throw these boxes away. She went and looked in the boxes. Do you know she found 3 boxes filled with letters? Her uncle's Purple Heart. Letters, the telegram saying that he was missing in action. Letters of condolence to her grandmother. She showed me the letters and said, those letters, that's my grandmother's tears.
Emotional.
And was able to share these with this author. The book was just published. It's called For Crew and Country. The Franklin Library has a copy. You can also get it at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. For Crew and Country by John Wukowitz. And Linda Harden of Franklin was, if she hadn't listened and remembered that her father said, don't throw these away, the book would not be the way it was, because her uncle was one of the major characters in the book. I don't know that the man would have even written it if he hadn't been able to get that information. You never know what you have that somebody might want to know. Make sure and tell people. Have I made my point? All right. I don't want to beat that. Okay, so, but just be clear. Photographs. Do any of you all have digital photographs on your computer? that you've got just mounds and mounds of photographs that you couldn't even tell what they all are? Are they all perfectly categorized so you can find exactly where they are? Are mine? No, I'm preaching to this choir here. Especially digital photographs and other photographs, the best way to see them is actually to print them out, surprisingly.
Right.
Because if things are digital, all of us know that things keep changing. They keep getting another version. They keep creating another version of Word, and there's another version of Word, and there's another version of software. And unless you have a plan to keep what they call migrating to new, updated stuff, those digital pictures, before long, are going to be inaccessible. I turned to my professional photo organizer friend, who I gave a contact for her in the resources as well. There are professional photo organizers. There is help. I am not one, but I probably need one. What she said was the first thing you need to do is to sort out what pictures tell a story, sort them into topics, throw out all those blurry pictures, except if it's the only picture you have, say your father with his precious antique car, then don't throw something out. If it's the only one, even if it is blurry, but if it's just blurry out of focus and you didn't get around to it, throw it out. Don't keep all those. It's a waterfall of digital pictures because we can take so many. I am most guilty of that. Don't keep them all. So throw those out. Throw all those ones that you don't even know where the scenery is anymore. Get rid of them. You're just, if there's something that you say, oh yes, that's part, and you want to make a topical photo album, sure, do that. But if it's just, here's this, here we're at the highway here, oh here's another great picture here, you've probably already forgotten where they are. Don't clutter your life with all those photographs. And so of the ones that you keep, many of you I'm sure have grandchildren. Make a photo album for your grandchildren. Here's one for you, and then give it to them. And you don't have to keep it all. Make another photo album that's topical, wedding, special trips. You know the topics in your life that are special. I scanned pictures from our family photos and put them into my dad's book as this is part of his story. This was part of our family story. Amazingly, as much with all this technology, books are still, you're not going to need a reader to be able to read a book. You're going to be able to open it and read type. And if you're real concerned, you can do heirloom books with acid-free paper, with hardbound, and make like 2 copies. These were cheaper made, but I was able to get 50 or 100. And the expense was my time. The expense was my time and God bless my husband's computer efforts, that he knows how to do this a lot better than I do. But, that's up to you for what you want. But there are many options available other than just carrying those pictures in a box that nobody's ever going to look at a box when they're not organized, they're not topical, they don't have anything that says what's on them. There are guidelines for what to do for identifying pictures, because once you're gone, those pictures are not going to, people aren't going to know who's in them. And so you do not want to use ballpoint pen. You want to use a number 2 pencil on the back. And the ideal thing is to put them into photo albums that then you can write on the photo album who is in the book. Anything else about pictures before we move on to furniture? Another thing that occurred to me the last time I gave this presentation was, have any of you heard of Habitat for Humanity?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that Habitat for Humanity has what are called restores?
Yep. What stores?
Restores. Capital E, R-E, capital S, restore.
Over in Dedham they have one.
Is there one in Dedham? I know there's one in Worcester, but I'm not sure exactly for Medfield, the very closest one. And basically, you go onto the Habitat for Humanity website, and they will have a list. And restores I know about because my son is still creating his home and still building on, and they found furniture, they found cabinets, they found materials, they found kitchen sinks, they found all sorts of things. And what I saw on the website is that most of these stores will come and arrange pickup for free.
Oh, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Exactly, because
Salvation Army.
yeah, because I know a lot of places will charge for pickup. I can't
Yeah.
promise that, and it's up to you, whatever you have, you would need to call the individual store. So furniture. One of the things that you want to think about when you move into a smaller space, I treasure having a guest room. I know most people would like to be able to entertain people, and a lot of times when you move into a smaller space, you lose your guest room. What do? The natural thing is to get a fold-out bed, like a sofa bed.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing that you can do is to use the space under your bed for a spare mattress, and just slide a mattress under there, so when you need it, you just pull the mattress out, and it's not in the way. Otherwise, you're not having to give a whole big space for a bed, and a sofa bed is very heavy, and it can be very expensive. But an extra mattress you probably were trying to get rid of anyway, slide it under your bed. Up the bed you're going to sleep on anyway, you've got another space to give somebody. So you have to start looking for things, cookbooks, things like you don't have as much cabinet space, but you might have a space underneath a cabinet, and you can install cups and hang cups. That how many of us have too many coffee cups?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I know, they're so cute, and people love to give them to us for Christmas, but where do you put them? You can hang them underneath your countertops, or your cabinet, the bottoms of your cabinets. You can, if you've got a room and you want to break it up, you can have open shelving so that you can make it so that it's not feeling like it's quite so much. It can give you a little more shelf space without crowding everything up. Books are a problem. What do you do with books? Most of you probably know. I'm betting the Medfield Library has a book sale.
They do.
I'm guessing you can donate books here too. The one other suggestion for even a very small space is take off unneeded doors. Do you live in a space that has a door for every single space you go through? Probably want to still leave the bathroom door. That would be a nice thing to leave for guests. But there are other doors that are sometimes in interior spaces that end up just called bedroom doors. Do you really need a bedroom door? Maybe yes, maybe no. But when you have a bedroom door, it blocks things, and it makes it feel smaller. You might want to think about taking a bedroom door off. So these are just some ideas, and they're things to not only to pare down, but make so that living in a smaller space is workable. Because that's part of it too. So you're not feeling like you're punishing yourself by choosing to live in a smaller space, but you're making it workable. Okay, do any of you have quilts in your family? Yes. Okay.
Joan can talk to you about.
Oh, okay. Some of you are quilters? Okay. Do you know about storing quilts? And how to safely store quilts? And do you know about that? Did you all know that there's a quilt museum in Lowell? All right, because there are certain. I listed some things from a website that I found about just sort of standards that you need to do. And one of the things is not to store the quilts in plastic. Plastic is like the worst thing that you can do for a quilt. We have my family has a quilt that my great-great-grandmother started the squares back in the 1870s. And it was actually put together by, I think, her daughter or granddaughter, I'd have to check. And then the granddaughter actually wrote an essay in the 1930s about the quilt. And my great-great-grandmother was on the stage, and all of these fabrics were costumes that she performed in. And the essay tells what, what performances, what plays they were actually on stage and where she wore these costumes. So that's called provenance, that you know where it's from, and it makes it a significant kind of a quilt. Are any people here veterans? Yes. Are you a veteran? Yes. Have you all shared your stories with a Veterans Oral History Project? There is a Veterans Oral History Project that anyone who is a veteran really owes it to themselves, not just other people. And there's a website address on here. I have actually started a Veterans Oral History Project in Bellingham, and am coordinating with the cable station to record veterans who are in Bellingham and in Mendon. But closer to Medfield, the closest one that I know is in Natick. And Natick is not that far from Medfield. And you just put in Natick Veterans Oral History Project, and you will find that on the internet. They are the people that taught the Library of Congress what they were doing, and they modeled the Veterans Oral History Project nationally on the project in Natick. Okay, do any of you all have family letters, family diaries, family Bibles that you don't know what to do with? That's where I would encourage you to take the information from that family Bible and enter those names, those birth dates, those death dates, those marriage dates, and the children and such into, I believe it's Family Tree. Forgive me for not, I thought I put that down on the list.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's one way, so that when you start saying, well, yes, you can pass that on, but you can also share it, because when you put it into these databases, you also have a way of accessing it. There's Mormon churches have family history centers. There's one in Franklin that I know of. I'm not sure the closest for you that would have a family history center. And these are free services, and people will help you to do the genealogy for your family. They would help you to enter the family tree from your Bible and get those, because that makes a
That's
massive...
a good resource, the Mormon.
It is, actually.
I have a daughter-in-law went out to Utah.
Yeah, they have a huge database, and they're constantly, as a community effort, they're going into communities and putting community records into those databases. So anything you have that's sitting in a closet, it would be wonderful if you could share that. I found these letters of my grandfather, where I still have them in a shoebox. And I never knew my grandfather. He died before I was born, and I always missed him. I always missed him. When my mother died, we were cleaning out her drawer, and we came across a single letter that my grandfather wrote to her. This was her father-in-law. And we brought it out into the living room. This was as we gathered for my mother's funeral, and I read it out loud. And as I read that letter out loud, I heard my grandfather's voice for the first time. He had little smiley faces every time he made a joke, and they were sprinkled all through his letter.
Wow.
When I went through this shoebox, I found, I'm not sure, at least 10 or 12 more letters that he wrote to my father and my mother. And they were sprinkled with the little smiley faces. And as I transcribed those letters, I learned his voice. And it was like I was able to claim him. And when I did these stories with my dad and his sister, I discovered that in their travels from Minnesota to California to Florida, looking for a place that my grandfather could live with arthritis, on their travels, my grandfather insisted they stop at the Grand Canyon. And his children were teenagers then, and you know how uncheerful teenagers can be about getting up in the morning. He made them get up to see the sunrise on the rim of the Grand Canyon. And I learned that story. I never heard it until I was collecting these stories. Well, that winter when I was doing this, my husband took me to Arizona, and he said, we got to get to the Grand Canyon. Well, I am not a morning person, but I'm going to tell you, because of what I learned in those letters, I was there at sunup. I didn't have my hair brushed, I barely had my clothes on, but I saw the sun come up, and I felt my grandfather right there,
Wow.
right there with me.
Did anybody tell you the sunset's also very beautiful?
Oh, I saw that too. But it was the sunrise that I knew my grandfather had seen. Yes, the sunset is actually much more beautiful, but the sunrise was when he was standing next to me. And that's the power of sharing those stories. We think they're not interested. We think that they're not going to pay any attention, but when you write things down, have any of you ever had a problem with somebody in your family not listening to what you said, but then you've written a note or a grocery list, and at least it makes some difference? Because when you write things down, it gives it credence. It gives it some extra power. And that's the power of writing things down. You take your own stories seriously. Can you tell I really care about this?
Yeah, you do.
You take your own stories seriously, and when you do, other people do as well. One other story about making this book. When we were still making it, I brought the rough drafts down to my father to make sure that he was okay with what we were putting in. And my brother and his 4 children were visiting. And I have to tell you, my father had these chapters, loose leaf chapters, and my dad got to watch as his 4 grandchildren grabbed from one to the other with the different chapters. Are you finished with that chapter yet? Have you finished that chapter? I want to read that chapter. Oh, what about this? And they found out about his military days, his troublemaking military days when things got a little too quiet. They learned about going out in the desert and about the turkeys that ate all of the raisins that my grandfather was trying to make grapes into raisins, and it didn't work, and the turkeys ate all of them. They found all of these stories, and they could not put them down. And now that my dad is gone, they're paying attention to the few people that are left in our family that are older, because they're saying, you know, these are people there's more there. And we need to sit up, and when there's talking family stories, we don't want to miss that. It has changed them. So when you say, oh, my children are not interested, no, you can't make them. But I can encourage you that if you write things down, you might be surprised. I can encourage you, you don't need help to write things down. It helps if you've got a partner. You can start a writing group here at the Senior Center. You can meet with other people. You can hire help. That's the kind of stuff that I do. But you don't have to. You can do it, but it's really hard to do it all on your own. I would encourage you to partner with someone, to even work with a family member and say, I think I'd really like to do this. You might be surprised that they're really grateful that they've been waiting for you to say you would do it. I can't promise you any of that, but I do know that if you write it down, it makes a difference. These are what are called print on demand that you do digitally. I didn't have to go to a publisher and say, would you please print my book? I am the publisher. And so I can help people publish the books once they've gotten things written down. If you want help writing them, I can do that, but I can also help publishing them and help you with decisions about what sort of choices you wanted to make. Size, paper, format, any of those sort of things. I can't make those decisions, I can't tell the stories, but I can listen to them. And that's something that I love to do. So thank you very, very much for coming today.
Hi, I'm Kurt Schilling, and you're watching Medfield.tv.